A few weeks ago, our little village was rocked by controversy. Many have recommended to me and to other clergy not to speak out on this issue because whatever we say could offend someone. And I acknowledge that that may be true. And I apologize in advance if my words differ from what you would say on the topic. But I also believe that remaining silent is not an option. As a community, we should be able to face issues head-on, honestly, respectfully, and think together, constructively and lovingly, about how to make a better path forward. I don't want to rehash what may or may not have happened that October morning in a second grade classroom at Seth Boyden. I want to focus on what happened after the alleged incident. A claim against a teacher went viral when Olympic fencer Ibtihaj Muhammad shared it with her over 3 million followers on social media. In an instant, from a single post, a teacher's reputation was maligned and denigrated across the world. Not only was her reputation harmed, her life was threatened. It was frightening and infuriating to read the vitriolic, anti-Semitic, and misogynistic attacks that followed. Whatever happened in the classroom did not warrant such attacks or hateful response. Police are still investigating what happened, so we truly don't know the facts. What we do know is that a person's life was threatened, and she had to fear for her safety. And on the other side, we also know that a child and her family are angry and hurt and desperately want their voices to be heard. Something happened at school that day and deeply upset this child, and her cries and her voice have also gotten lost in the shuffle. It's been heartbreaking for me to see our community torn apart by this event. People immediately rushed to judgment and chose sides. Some readily believed the accusation and called for the immediate firing of the longtime teacher, while others ran to her defense, decrying anti-Semitism and claiming to speak out for the truth. While some leaders denounced any form of bigotry, anti-Semitism, or Islamophobia in our towns, others argued that these public statements contributed to the rumor mill and fanned the flames. The fact that this incident sparked such controversy teaches us two things, I believe. One, trial by social media is very wrong and dangerous. And two, we urgently need to build stronger, more meaningful relationships between our Muslim and Jewish communities. I'm reminded of a powerful midrash from Breshit Rabbah that relates to this week's Parshat Toldot. When Esav returns from the field and finds that his father Yitzchak has mistakenly given his blessing away to his younger brother, the Torah tells us that Esav burst into a wild and bitter cry. Vayitzak tza'aka gdola umara ad me'od. It's impossible not to hear the father's name, Yitzchak, in Esav's cry, as the root is close to the word Vayitzak, that he cried out. Esav weeps aloud, crying, "Bless me too, Father." Like a hyperlink, the Midrash then takes us to Megillat Esther, at the moment when Mordechai learns of Haman's plan to annihilate the Jews. The text says that Mordechai tore his clothing, put on sackcloth and ashes, and went through the city of Shushan crying out a wild and bitter cry, "Vayizak za'aka gedola umara." The language used to describe Mordechai's desperate cry is nearly identical to the language describing Esav's in our parsha. And so our sages draw a direct line between Esav and Mordechai's cries, teaching that God may not bring about justice immediately, but will eventually do so. Says the Midrash, Yaakov made Esav break out into a cry just once, and where was he punished for it? In Shushan. As it says, and he cried out loudly and bitterly. The God of Israel does not let Jacob get away with causing Esav's pain. Not only will Jacob himself suffer when he is later deceived by Lavan, Jacob's descendant too will someday feel the pain of injustice. The Midrash turns Jacob and Mordechai from individuals into symbols of their two nations, seeing Yaakov as a progenitor of the Jewish people and Esav as the founder of the Edomites, enemies of the Jews. It's all the more remarkable then that the Midrash connects the experience of Mordechai and Esav. In Mordechai's cry, our sages want us to hear the echo of Esav's cry, and vice versa. Their cries are linked, they are the same. Two vulnerable human beings both expressing a primal desperation and fear. Mordechai mourns and fears for the future of the Jewish people. He essentially cries out to God as a parent asking, "Have you no blessing for the Jewish people? Bless us too." And in our parsha, Esau feels unloved and rejected by his father, crying out for the same blessing. Without his father's blessing, Esau fears for his future and that of his descendants. Until we can hear both Esau's and Mordecai's cries, until we can acknowledge that deep pain, hurt, and anger exist on both sides of this issue, I don't believe that we can move forward. The Torah requires that when we see the animal of our enemy fallen down under a heavy burden, we must stop and help lift the burden. Even more astonishing, the Zohar teaches that Esau continues to weep, even in our own time, and that the Messiah will not come until Esau's tears have stopped flowing. These traditional texts emphasize that justice requires us to tap into our empathy for one another, especially those with whom we vehemently disagree, when empathy does not come easily. We must hear our own cries in their cries. We must do our best to understand their perspective and hope that they'll do the same for us. We should cry together for the injustice and the pain that this event caused. Then, little by little, quietly and without the fanfare of social media, I pray that different communities will meet, engage in dialogue, and try to build greater trust. Perhaps if we come together, Jews and Muslims, communities of color, white folks, that we can mend and build anew our relationships based on mutual respect. Tensions will always exist, and there's much on which we will never agree. But I hope that over time we'll come to understand one another better. At the very least, may we try to follow the practice of Dan l'kaf zchut, extending the benefit of the doubt to one another, rather than rushing to assume the worst. And if we make the first move, reaching out in empathy to strengthen our relationships, perhaps we'll feel each other's empathy extended to us as well.